Alright, so this is an experiment to see if I'm going to do video lectures from now on or not. This is for Chapter 3, Families and Communities, which you already have the Prezi for. Some of you may have already taken the quiz for. But I'm just trying to get a sense of whether this format works. So bear with me as I go through this. The idea of Chapter 3 is that schools are more than just places where we educate our students. They are community centers. They're important in their communities, important to the families who live in those communities. Schools benefit everybody in the community, not just those whose children go to school there, which tends to be a bone of contention among those who pay taxes. Many times you'll hear people say, I'm not sure why I'm paying school taxes when I don't have any children in the school district. But the idea, legally, philosophically, as far as a country goes, we all benefit from all of our children being educated. Alright, so we're going to go through the Prezi that you guys all had access to and get a sense of, just to hit the highlights of Chapter 3. So as I said already, schools are more to the communities than just places where we educate our children. But because of that, schools tend to come under fire. What role should schools play in culture and society as a whole? As I put in the Prezi, the schools contribute to the health of the community. It takes care of its children, prepares them to contribute in society in the future. But the public view on schools changes. Unfortunately, public education tends to be a political football that people just love to kick it around. Everybody has an opinion about schools and how they can be improved. One of my favorite quote comments that people will say is, well, that they know exactly how to fix schools, and that's based on the fact that they went to school. Which in a sense to me, I always thought it was kind of like, well, I had my appendix taken out, so I could probably take out yours. This sense that teachers aren't really professionals. They're just people who just transfer information onto students, which it's much different than that, as we already know. It's a much more complex process. Everybody has an opinion about schools. Those opinions and attitudes influence how educational policies go into effect and practices. I'm clicking through here, hit the highlights. Parents generally see schools as, they rate them higher than the general public do. I think it's because of firsthand knowledge. They know what their students come home with. They know that regardless of what the public attitude may be, there are good teachers who do care about students and they care about their jobs. Employers and to some extent college professors are not as positive about how good students are prepared, how well students are prepared for either employment or college. This has been a long, the college thing, those things come and go. I think there's more of that reflects a cultural change. Students need to be more caught up in checking their text phone, their text on their cell phones, they're logging into computers and Facebook than to do face-to-face. This course is a perfect example where the idea that colleges and universities offer more online courses is purely market-driven. Most educational research shows that face-to-face is better. Now, I know many of you are across the large state here, and this may be the only option that some people have for taking college courses. That being said, I think the attitude that college professors have about students is more reflected by technology and some sense of what the next generation brings. I think those things are always there. Older people, myself included, will always have a view of like, well, back in my days, students went to school and they cared about their education. No, not necessarily. When I was in high school, there were just as many people who screwed off and didn't do their work and were problems. Those things don't change. As far as employers go, employers throughout history have never thought that their employees come to them perfectly trained. And that is something I would wish this course had more about, the history of the roles of public schools through it. There's some of that discussion in your chapters, but not to the extent I'd like to see it. This idea that the industry and business in this country throughout history have always had an influence on what should be done in the schools. And that stems from a purely economic idea, this sense that if I own a company that builds cars, for example, I'd rather my future employees learn how to do the job in school. That way, I don't have to pay for it. Why should I pay for training my employees when I can make the schools do it? So you see things like vocational programs, and these are all good programs. Don't get me wrong, but let's not be naive as to why these things happen the way they do. And as I said before, parents and students, they know who the good teachers are. There are always good teachers and bad teachers. And just like everything else in our culture, bad teachers get all the press. You can read about a handful, 3 or 4 different congressmen who have affairs on their wives for whatever reason, and they get kind of should they run for office again? Should they leave their office? You don't hear about the hundreds of others who do a good job. They just don't get the press. Same with teachers. My school where I taught, 85 teachers, there were probably 5 of them who were just what I called check collectors. They were just there making money. They were done. They were cynical. They had seen it all, they thought, and they kind of lost their edge on coming to work every day. But by and large, most people enjoy their jobs and do what they can to do a good job with it. Recent events have jeopardized perceptions, as I say in the Prezi, and I'm thinking primarily there of the recent news coverage of teachers in Wisconsin. How teachers who make, I taught for 10 years in Pennsylvania, and when I left teaching, I was making $34,000. I find it hard to believe when people blame teaching as a profession as why the country's bankrupt or why states are going bankrupt. We certainly don't make enough money to make that big problem. Granted, there's a lot more teachers in some states than others, and there's things like benefit packages and retirement packages that affect all that. But I think it's just they're an easy target, and it's a shame that we are teachers being an easy target for these complaints. And then I had a video in there that didn't work in the Prezi, which was protesters at news coverage of protesters at the Wisconsin thing. I'm not sure why it got removed from the Prezi, but I replaced that with one. I sent everybody one with a conversation at a town hall meeting with Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey with a teacher, and that kind of gives you the point here was to give you a sense of the negative view that teaching has by the general public. Again, I think parents think differently, but they're not as vocal as the general taxpaying public for some reason. Everybody, just like I said, or not that I said, but I had you watch a video in the first week, the RSA video, about how silly it is to talk about raising standards. Well, of course we want to raise standards. We don't want to lower them, as the video stated. Everybody tends to agree that we can always do a better job. Then I have this thing on here that's from your book about the Educational Testing Service. Did a survey that 7 out of 10 adults believe that teachers in schools should be held accountable for student learning. And I wrote in here, I asked you if you could tell me the significance of the fact that ETS did the study and added to discussion post. As of yet, no one has at least responded to that point. Where I'm going at here is that there are underlying reasons why people do research. Educational Testing Service has a stake. They are a stakeholder in testing. So you have to question the validity of a research that benefits those doing the research. And I'm going to give you a quote from another book. This isn't from your book, but the Kaplan Corporation is a testing company that let me find my statistics here. In 1991, the company was worth $70 million. Since then, with No Child Left Behind and the increase of high-stakes testing, the company is now worth $2 billion. So there's always the question that who benefits from standardized testing is really just the companies that make the tests. And I don't want to get into the whole thing about testing because that comes up in other sections. But when in high school, juniors are tested, and I believe 8th graders are tested. And what schools have been faced to do is pay outside companies to come in and test those students on off years. So, for example, you'll come in and they'll hire a company to come in when students are sophomores before their junior year. Early in their sophomore year, we'll take a pre-standardized test to target these students and see which ones need extra help. Some of these are called, some of the names are Terra Nova is one of the companies, Foresight tests, and what that allows a school to do is test its students a year before they're required to, target the ones who have problems, say in math and algebra, assign those students then to rudimentary courses for the next year, so by the time it comes to take the real test their junior year, they've had some test prep. And these tests aren't cheap. You know, schools will pay $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 for that extra test.